So maybe you're on vacation, you're in Athens for the first time. During the day you're experiencing a bunch of new events and new sights and sounds, and as it's going by that is prospectively it seems to be flying by. In retrospect, however, maybe the next day or you're back from vacation looking back upon that, it seems to be a long day. So retrospectively, it seems that it was an extended period of time. And this is something that was pointed out as far back as William James in his Principles of Neuroscience over 100 years ago. And the point is that retrospectively we're not so much telling time, but we're rebuilding or estimating how much time has elapsed based on the number of experiences we have in memory. Most of the world's ecosystems are the result of millennia of coevolution by organisms, adapting to their environment and each other until a stable balance is reached. Healthy ecosystems maintain this balance via limiting factors, environmental conditions that restrict the size or range of a species. These include things like natural geography and climate, food availability, and the presence or absence of predators. For example, plant growth depends on levels of sunlight and soil nutrients. The amount of edible plants affects the population of herbivores, which in turn impacts the carnivores that feed on them. And a healthy predator population keeps the herbivores from becoming too numerous and devouring all the plants. But even minor changes in one factor can upset this balance, and the sudden introduction of non-native organisms can be a pretty major change. A species that is evolved in a separate habitat will be susceptible to different limiting factors, different predators, different energy sources, and different climates. If the new habitat's limiting factors fail to restrict the species' growth, it will continue to multiply, outcompeting native organisms for resources and disrupting the entire ecosystem. Facts you read, hear, or study become memories through a process with three main steps. First comes acquisition, the moment you encounter a new piece of information. Each sensory experience activates a unique set of brain areas. In order to become lasting memories, these sensory experiences have to be consolidated by the hippocampus, influenced by the amygdala, which emphasizes experiences associated with strong emotions. The hippocampus then encodes memories, probably by strengthening synaptic connections stimulated during the original sensory experience. Once memory has been encoded, it can be remembered or retrieved later. Memories are stored all over the brain, and it's likely the prefrontal cortex that signals for their retrieval. So how does stress affect each of these stages? In the first two stages, moderate stress can actually help experiences enter your memory. Your brain responds to stressful stimuli by releasing hormones known as corticosteroids, which activate a process of threat detection and threat response in the amygdala. One of the most striking properties about life is that it has color. To understand the phenomenon of color, it helps to think about light as a wave. But, before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about waves in general. Imagine you're sitting on a boat on the ocean, watching a cork bob up and down in the water. The first thing you notice about the motion is that it repeats itself. The cork traces the same path over and over again, up and down, up and down. This repetitive or periodic motion is characteristic of waves. Then you notice something else. Using a stopwatch, you measure the time it takes for the piece of cork to go over its highest position down to its lowest and then back up again. Suppose this takes 2 seconds. To use the physics jargon, you've measured the period of the waves that cork is bobbing on. That is, how long it takes a wave to go through its full range of motion once. The same information can be expressed in a different way by calculating the wave's frequency. Frequency, as the name suggests, tells you how frequent the waves are. That is, how many of them go by in 1 second. If you know how many seconds one full wave takes, then it's easy to work out how many waves go by in 1 second. In this case, since each wave takes 2 seconds, the frequency is 0.5 waves per second. So enough about bobbing corks. What about light and color? If light is a wave, then it must have a frequency. Right? Well, yes, it does. And it turns out that we already have a name for the frequency of the light that our eyes detect. It's called color. That's right. Color is nothing more than a measure of how quickly the light waves are waving. There is no denying that the concept of family has certainly changed in American society over the last few decades. Statistics continue to show that fewer Americans are getting married, and those who do so are having fewer children or none at all. More marriages are ending in divorce. More people are living alone, cohabiting with someone, or marrying more than once in a lifetime and creating stepfamilies. Traditional families once dominated every neighborhood. A traditional family consists of a husband and wife, plus their children, whether biological or adopted. If they have any today, American society displays greater diversity, and many American households can be considered non-traditional under this definition. Family structures that may be considered non-traditional or alternative include single parenthood, cohabitation, same-sex families, and polygamy. Let's take a brief look at each of these. Single parenthood was fairly common prior to the 20th century due to the more frequent deaths of spouses. What is bipolar disorder? The word bipolar means two extremes. For the many millions experiencing bipolar disorder around the world, life is split between two different realities: elation and depression. Although there are many variations of bipolar disorder, let's consider a couple. Type 1 has extreme highs alongside the lows, while Type 2 involves briefer, less extreme periods of elation interspersed with long periods of depression. For someone seesawing between emotional states, it can feel impossible to find the balance necessary to lead a healthy life. Type 1's extreme highs are known as manic episodes, and they can make a person range from feeling irritable to invincible. But these euphoric episodes exceed ordinary feelings of joy, causing troubling symptoms like racing thoughts, sleeplessness, rapid speech, impulsive actions, and risky behaviors. In 2019, a study led by Zurich's Crowther Lab analyzed satellite imagery of the world's existing tree cover. By combining it with climate and soil data and excluding areas necessary for human use, they determined Earth could support nearly 1 billion hectares of additional forest. That's roughly 1.2 trillion trees. This staggering number surprised the scientific community, prompting additional research. Scientists now cite a more conservative but still remarkable figure. By their revised estimates, these restored ecosystems could capture anywhere from 100 to 200 billion tons of carbon, accounting for over 1/6 of humanity's carbon emissions. More than half of the potential forest canopy for new restoration efforts can be found in just 6 countries. And the study can also provide insight into existing restoration projects, like the Bond Challenge, which aims to restore 350 million hectares of forest by 2030. But this is where it gets complicated. Ecosystems are incredibly complex, and it's unclear whether they're best restored by human intervention. It's possible the right thing to do for certain areas is to simply leave them alone. How do schools of fish swim in harmony? And how do the tiny cells in your brain give rise to the complex thoughts, memories, and consciousness that are you? Oddly enough, those questions have the same general answer: emergence, or the spontaneous creation of sophisticated behaviors and functions from large groups of simple elements. Like many animals, fish stick together in groups, but that's not just because they enjoy each other's company. It's a matter of survival. Schools of fish exhibit complex swarming behaviors that help them evade hungry predators, while a lone fish is quickly singled out as easy prey. So, which brilliant fish leader is the one in charge? Actually, no one is, and everyone is. So, what does that mean? While the school of fish is elegantly twisting, turning, and dodging sharks in what looks like deliberate coordination, each individual fish is actually just following 2 basic rules that have nothing to do with the shark. 1. Stay close, but not too close to your neighbor, and 2. Keep swimming. The sensation of fullness is set in motion as food moves from your mouth down your esophagus. Once it hits your stomach, it gradually fills the space. That causes the surrounding muscular wall to stretch, expanding slowly like a balloon. A multitude of nerves wrapped intricately around the stomach wall sense the stretching. They communicate with the vagus nerve up to the brainstem and hypothalamus, the main parts of the brain that control food intake. But that's just one input your brain uses to sense fullness. After all, if you fill your stomach with water, you won't feel full for long. Your brain also takes into account chemical messengers in the form of hormones produced by endocrine cells throughout your digestive system. These respond to the presence of specific nutrients in your gut and bloodstream, which gradually increase as you digest your food. As the hormones seep out, they're swept up by the blood and eventually reach the hypothalamus in the brain. Over 20 gastrointestinal hormones are involved in moderating our appetites. What I've learned is that the most effective people and teams in any domain do something we can all emulate. They go through life deliberately alternating between two zones, the learning zone and the performance zone. The learning zone is when our goal is to improve. Then we do activities designed for improvement, concentrating on what we haven't mastered yet, which means we have to expect to make mistakes, knowing that we will learn from them. That is very different from what we do when we're in our performance zone, which is when our goal is to do something as best as we can, to execute. Then we concentrate on what we have already mastered and we try to minimize mistakes. Both of these zones should be part of our lives, but being clear about when we want to be in each of them, with what goal, focus, and expectations, helps us better perform and better improve. The performance zone maximizes our immediate performance, while the learning zone maximizes our growth and our future performance. Jeannie spent the first 13 years of her life locked away in a small bedroom in her parents' home. In 1970, her parents were charged with child abuse and Jeannie began rehabilitation with a team of psychologists and linguists. And scientists were using her experiences to answer the following question: if a person is deprived of language throughout their childhood, can they ever learn enough to be able to communicate well? At first, the answer appeared to be yes. Jeannie quickly began to learn new words for the objects around her and even say phrases with 2 or 3 words similar to how toddlers speak. However, from there, her ability to communicate verbally plateaued. This is because she could not learn grammar, which linguist Noam Chomsky believes separates human language from the communication of animals. It appeared that Jeannie had passed the critical period of learning human language, which is thought to end around puberty. For better or worse, we live in a world profoundly affected by Sigmund Freud. If I had to ask you to name a famous psychologist, the answer of most of you would be Freud. He was the most famous psychologist ever, and he had a profound influence on the 20th and 21st century. Some biographical information: he was born in the 1850s. He spent most of his life in Vienna, Austria, but he died in London, and he escaped to London soon after retreating there at the beginning of World War II as the Nazis began to occupy where he lived. He was one of the most famous scholars ever, but he was not known for any single discovery. Instead, he was known for the development of an encompassing theory of mind, one that he developed over the span of many decades.